Okay, God, I don't know if you can hear me, but it's me, Hope. I'm stuck here in this jail cell, about to be transferred to Fluvanna Correctional Center for Women. God, it's a maximum security women's prison, 2 hours from home. It's 2 hours from my babies. Oh, God, how did my life get to be such a mess? And I'm mad at you. You could have stopped that drunk driver from killing my Bobby. He was a good man and a great husband and a fantastic father to our kids. 9 months without him, I still feel like I can't breathe. What was I supposed to do? What was I supposed to do? I don't know what you want from me. I had 3 mouths to feed without his income, with no life insurance. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should have come up with a better way. But God, I still don't understand. 2 years in prison for stealing $210 worth of groceries. 2 years and a felony charge for that extra 10 bucks. God, the last thing I ever meant to do was abandon my kids, and now that's just what I have done. Bobby's sister was the only one I could think of who might take them, but she said she can't afford all 3. So it looks like they're going to foster care. God, please, please, you have to keep them together. Without Bobby, and now without me, those kids need each other. Bobby Jr. needs somebody who'll play catch with him and keep his pitching arm going. And Rachel, she's going to go through puberty sometime soon here. God, she needs somebody there to guide her. And little Sarah, she started kindergarten this fall, God, and I was in jail. I never meant this. I never meant any of it. Miss Maddie from Mama's old church, she's the only one who still writes. And she said that I could turn to you. So here I am. Hope. If you're real, if you exist, if you're good and kind and loving like they say, can you help me? Please? Miss Maddie says all I have to do is ask you into my heart. So right now, I'm asking. I've never needed you like this before. God, I want to be a good Christian. But the truth is I don't really know how. And if I am a good Christian, can you help my babies? Please? God, I'm so scared. And I am so alone. I don't even have money for soap or toothpaste. And I hear Fluvanna's a really scary place. But one of the women, she's been there before, she told me that at Fluvanna's visitation, you don't have to talk on the phone behind the glass. At Fluvanna, your kids can actually come into the room and you can hug them and hold them. Oh God, please, you've just got to give Bobby's sister the heart and the gas money to bring those kids. I need those kids, and they need me. I've really messed up. But I did it. I mean, I made this mess. It's just if Bobby was still alive, I wouldn't be here. If Mama were still alive, I wouldn't be here. But I guess like Miss Maddie said, if I'd been in church, maybe the church folks might have helped. I mean, I can see that now. Just after Bobby's funeral in that place, I couldn't bear to walk back through those double doors. You have to understand it wasn't anything personal. I didn't mean anything. Oh, they're calling my name. That must mean it's time to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to have to do this. Please, God, you can't send me by myself. Please, send somebody to help me. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. pretty lucky. I get to take the jumpsuit off. But for thousands of men and women incarcerated in Virginia's prisons, Hope's story is all too real. Sometimes the shattered pieces of broken dreams only land inside a prison cell. Hope's journey will be long, but her questions are sincere. What's going to happen to her? What's going to happen to her children? Will being a Christian make any difference at all? And is there anyone to help? Today at Fluvanna Correctional Center for Women, she'll find a chaplain placed there by Grace Inside. Grace Inside is the organization that has been placing expressly professing Christian chaplains inside Virginia's prisons since 1920. We've been around since before the Department of Corrections was around. In 1920, 7 denominations met at the Baptist Building, which was then in old downtown Richmond. They got together and they decided they wanted chaplaincy at the one state penitentiary to be the purview of the church and not the state. That's a good Baptist principle, isn't it? And so they easily pooled their resources for that one chaplain. Now here we are, almost 100 years later, and we provide 32 chaplains to over 35 institutions throughout the state of Virginia. Virginia has more institutions of incarceration than it has institutions of higher education. Now, you've probably never heard about Grace Inside. Grace Inside has had 5 different names over the years. Our most recent one was Chaplain Service Prison Ministry of Virginia. Before that, it was Chaplain Service of the Church of Virginia. But in 2014, we changed our name to Grace Inside. Now, you haven't heard of us in part because for many, many years, the denominations just took care of us. Your bishops, the leaders of the denomination served on our board, and the people in the pew didn't necessarily have to know who Grace Inside was. But in the 1980s, there became a dramatic boom in prison incarceration rates. So in the 1980s, early 1980s, there was roughly 300,000 people incarcerated nationwide in the United States. Currently, there are 2.3 million people incarcerated in the United States. We incarcerate a higher percentage of our population than any other nation worldwide. We incarcerate more than Russia did during Gulag, 6 times more than the entire land of China does, and more than South Africa did during apartheid. And we still call ourselves the land of the not anymore. 1 in every 80 Virginians is incarcerated, and 1 in every 32 is under the supervision of some form of correctional supervision. Each person incarcerated leaves on average 5 people in crisis behind. We have 30,000 people serving time in our prisons, another 15,000 serving time in our jails. That's a phenomenal number of people who are hurting behind incarceration. What happened to create this uptick of 2 million people in the past 30 years? The failed war on drugs. Drugs and drug and alcohol-related offenses are the #1 reason people are incarcerated. #1 reason by a long shot. We took a social problem, addiction, we decided we'd criminalize it, and so then we put people in prison who then don't get treatment, so when they're released, the addiction issues and the things that cause their addiction are still present in their lives. So how well has that war on drugs worked? We're at a higher level of opioid addiction in our country than ever before. We also closed something in the 1980s. I lived in Norfolk at the time, and I remember making the decision to do this. What did we close? Who knows? Psychiatric hospitals, absolutely. Gold star. Yes, they closed mental health institutions. We took people who were living in a mental health institution, and we said, hey, good luck to you. Have a nice life, and send them on their way. Now they're living there because they had a need. They couldn't function in the outside world. And it was better than a prison environment for people because you had specially trained folks to deal with those who have mental illness. And so then they can't function in the outside world, so they're vagrants. So we criminalize vagrancy. And then they're serving time in prison. Third reason, we abolished parole in Virginia in 1995. We don't talk about it much, but the tough on crime era had a lot of lasting impact. People are serving more time, longer sentences, they're growing older in prison. higher healthcare rates. It's expensive, it's costly, so they've actually reinstituted geriatric parole. We have an entire geriatric prison in the state of Virginia. Got a 92-year-old man serving time in our state. You can't tell me we can't come up with something better for him? Trying to struggle to get to church every Sunday at his institution. The geriatric prison in Virginia is where this artwork comes from. Two gentlemen donated this. I have the one up here is out on loan, actually. But these guys made these for me. I like to take them with me because I like to remind folks that each and every one of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. I would not want my introduction to you to be the worst thing that I've ever done. That's how we treat people who've been in prison. 3 strikes, you're outlaw had an impact. It was certainly applied and misapplied. The parole board wasn't even, people on juries weren't even told we'd abolish parole till 2002. So for 7 years, juries were sentencing people under the misunderstanding that they had the opportunity for parole. The parole board, when we abolished parole, went from letting 40% out on parole to letting 4% out on parole. So people who were sentenced with the idea that they would make parole were not making parole. So we've got an aging population in prison, and Deerfield Correctional Center has an assisted living facility inside it. 30,000 men and women. What else can I tell you about those in prison? The average reading level is 4th grade. Average education is 9th grade. The average sentence is just over 10 years for women. It is longer for men. I can tell you that most of these folks are parents. 80% of women in Virginia's prisons are mothers. 90% of that 80% are mothers of children under the age of 18. Those kids are 6 times more likely to become incarcerated themselves, but less likely to become incarcerated if they maintain contact with that incarcerated parent. In the world we live in, 1 out of every 17 white boys will land in prison during their lifetime, 1 out of every 7 Latinos, and 1 out of every 3 African American men. And that is not because people with darker pigment commit more crime. Where do we go looking for the drug bust? Do we go to the frat house or do we go to the hood? There is bias in every step of this process. If you want to learn more about it, the new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, Mass Incarceration in the Prison Industrialized Complex, is a great starter. It's sort of the most basic book of explaining the systemic issue of incarceration we've created for ourselves. In Virginia in 2015, we spent $1.145 billion incarcerating people. In your lifetime, that's well over $10,000 of your taxes. We have a gentleman serving time at Augusta Correctional Center. He is serving life in prison for 3 crimes within a 1-week setting. His wife left him for someone else. He went on a drinking binge, went to convenience store A, stole just over $200 worth of booze. Went to convenience store B, stole just over $200 worth of booze. Went to convenience store C, stole just over $200 worth of booze. He stole not even $800 worth of alcohol, and he's paying for it with life in prison under that failed and misapplied 3 strikes you're outlaw. Now, we do have innocent people serving time in prison. Let's not forget that. With the current rate of release based on DNA evidence, we're letting loose about 25% of people who are on death row. That means people that we've sentenced to die for their crime beyond a reasonable doubt. 1/4 of them are being released because they are not guilty. If you want to read on that, Just Mercy by Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, Stevenson is a fantastic book to help you understand another systemic way we are hurting people because we don't believe in innocent until proven guilty. We have what we call retribution bias. We would much rather see people get what's coming to them than grace. So Hebrews Chapter 13, verses 1 through 3 says, "Let mutual love continue, for thereby doing so some of you have entertained angels without knowing it. Remember those in prison as though in prison with them, those who are being tortured as though you yourself were being tortured." Remember those in prison as though you yourself were in prison with them. I believe that means that we are called to be aware of them. For the first century Christian community, they were trying to remind them, hey, you guys got to pay attention to one another. If you neglect them while they're there, how can you expect them to become a part of your community? How can you expect them to stay tied in? How can you expect them to survive the isolation, loneliness, and despair of the prison environment if you neglect them while they're there? And I think those same things are true today. That verse still speaks to me. Remember those in prison as though in prison with them. Be aware of them. So I've just told you a whole lot about the people who are in prison. Be aware of them. More than a cursory knowledge that people are in prison, but be aware of them. The second thing, once we're aware of them, I think we're called, if we remember those in prison as though in prison with them, I believe we're called to identify with people who are in prison. See ourselves as though it might be us. Some people have said, well, there but for the grace of God go I. I just didn't get caught. I object to that phrase only because why should some people get more grace than others? Sometimes it's dumb luck. Sometimes it's privilege. And we need to honor that that is a part of the story. Identify with those in prison. But Lynn, you just described them. We're nothing like them. We're a bunch of guys in church on a Saturday. We're not like those folks. Anybody in here never do anything stupid? Anybody in here never do anything wrong? Nobody in this church of good Baptist men would have ever committed any crimes, right? Nobody in here has ever thrown something at a spouse in a fit of anger, been on the phone while a child's in the bathtub. Nobody in here has ever had a drink and then tried to drive home, not Baptist. Nobody in here would have ever, I don't know, stolen anything. Nobody in here has run a stop sign. I know of a young man pulling 10 years because he failed to yield a stop sign. And in so doing, he ran into my friend Chloe. She was 6. The anniversary of her death is December 22nd. She'll have been gone 3 years. I am 100% sure he didn't wake up that morning and say, today I'm going to kill a child to destroy my life and ruin another family's. I had a 78-year-old woman pulling time in her Sunday school class came to me and said, Lynn, when did an accident stop being an accident? Again, when we'd rather see people get theirs than grace. But none of y'all in here have ever done anything like stealing. Nobody but me. When I was 4 years old, I was in the Pantry Pride grocery store in Norfolk, Virginia with my mother, who was a health food nut, serious health food nut. I was taught that vitamin C chewables were candy. Y'all with me? Okay, so I'm 4, and I'm figuring out that the sugar, the Brock's candy display is a little enticing. Y'all remember Brock's candy displays, bulk candy? And I wanted a piece of that candy, but I did know the rule was no sugar in my tummy, in my mouth, in my house. So I knew if I asked my mother, the answer was going to be a resounding no. Have y'all met my mom? The answer is going to be a resounding no. My mom actually came with me 2 months ago, so she hollered it out loud. So I didn't ask. When nobody was looking, I reached out, put that piece of candy in my pocket, went through the grocery store, hand on candy in pocket, snuck through the checkout line, hand on candy in pocket. When I got home, I ran to my bedroom, I shut and locked my bedroom door, I opened my stolen treasure, popped it in my mouth, and well, it tasted awful. In part because I was feeling guilty. Mostly because it was coffee flavored. When I was next in that grocery store, I confessed my great sin to my mom because my conscience was eating at me, and she gave me a penny to go to the customer service lady and give it and pay for my candy. But I had to tell the lady what I'd done. And I was fairly articulate at 4 years of age, but the lady couldn't understand me because I was so embarrassed I mumbled my way through. So the lady kept saying, say it again, honey. Honey, say it again. I couldn't understand you. Say it again. I was mortified. Finally, I turned and walked away. I learned something from that experience. I already knew stealing was wrong, didn't I?
Yes, she should.
Yeah, absolutely. I hid it. I shut my bed. I felt guilty. I was parented well. What I learned from that experience is that there were negative consequences to the choices that I made. I felt bad. I embarrassed myself in front of my mother. I embarrassed myself in front of the customer service lady. And when I got home, I had to do chores for 2 days to earn off the penny that my mother had given to me. And for all that time, trouble, and effort, I got one little on a yucky tasting piece of coffee candy. I really was parented well. What if my dad, instead of being the Baptist pastor, was a leader of a local gang? What if my mother, instead of stealing grapes from the grocery store, which she did, because you know tasting them is stealing.
It is.
It is. I was in college when somebody pointed that out to me because you were taking money from the farmer in the grocery store. What if I saw her steal more than grapes on a regular basis? How long would it have taken me to figure it out? I was a smart kid. I was in college about the grapes. And somebody had to point it out to me. What if my older brother liked to do hardball, a kind of drug, instead of baseball? What if I had more pigment to my skin? What if I were uneducated? What if I were poor? I can't promise you I'd have ever gotten to leave that prison those 11 and a half years at night. We can't pretend in the world we live in that those things don't matter, can we? No, we really can't. They do matter, they matter powerfully. What is the difference between somebody pulling time at Nottoway Correctional Center and somebody at Betty Ford? Resource. Yep, you got money, you can pay for it. One of our donors to Grace Inside, he's a nice guy, smart guy, wealthy gentleman. We don't have many of those, but we got a couple, and this is one of them. And he donates as much time as he does resource. But he was telling me the story, and even he, who's been a part of our organization for 15 years, was like, yeah, my grandson had a little trouble with alcohol, but we got him into rehab. Because I called the guy. What if you can't call a guy that's still your grandchild? Even he didn't understand the privilege he had. Identify with those in prison. But Lynn, they've done wrong. They made bad choices. All right, okay. But the Children's Defense Fund did a study a number of years ago, and they found 3 predicted values to determine which children enter the cradle-to-prison pipeline in our country. And make no mistake, there is one. Age of the mother at delivery. Geographic location of the mother at delivery. Socioeconomic status of the mother at delivery. All kinds of pieces play into that. Where's the dad? How old are they? I mean, all the systemic pieces. But those 3 factors determine more about a child's future than their choices. Could it be that it's more about the choices we make available? Somebody said he's a police officer, was a Xerox salesman, became a police officer because they needed him. And I worked at the prison, so I watched him go through his training and I watched him go through a shift. Now I love police. You do your job well, I'm all about you, right? This particular officer was somebody who said, I don't know why you spend your time at Fluvanna anyway. They're just the cockroaches of life. We ought to stomp on them and get them out of our way. They're only getting what they deserve. I'm so glad I don't get what I deserve. Jesus Christ comes to me with more hope, more grace, more love, more meaning, more value, more second chances, more 50th chances than I could ever deserve. I remember the man who got up and said, it took 52 rehab placements, but I've now been clean 10 years. Who but God would hold hope through 52 rehabs? Who holds hope for those in prison? Who holds hope for the 30,000 lives and the children they leave behind? for each and every one of us is a child of God. Someone Christ died for. Someone of value, they matter to God. And I believe they should matter to us. Please don't mishear me. I'm not saying that everybody in prison ought to be let out. I am saying we ought to make sure the influence of Jesus Christ continues to go in. Because who but Jesus Christ can change the heart of those in prison? You all know, and now I'm blanking on the guy's name. Hannah Graham, Morgan Harrington. I talk about this guy all the time. Matthew, Charlottesville. You know him? Matthew. Oh, that's right. Sorry, those of you videotaping it.
Drove a car into a crowd.
No, that was yesterday. But he's coming too. Yeah, he's coming too. So, the guy, he picked up the girl who was a taxi driver, and he picked up the drunk girl, raped her, and killed her. Hannah Graham, Morgan Harrington, and I cannot believe, I'm blanking on the guy's last name. But interestingly, you know, we talk about getting what you deserve. Could that guy ever get what he deserves? There's a girl missing from Newport News, actually, that they wonder, because it was during the time he lived here. There was a rape up in Fairfax. They convicted him. That's how they got the DNA evidence to convict him elsewhere. There's a girl missing down in Liberty when he was down there. I mean, good heavens. Can he ever get what he deserves? And yet one of my chaplains is serving as his pastor. Yikes. One of my chaplains is going to have to go in to see the neo-Nazi just convicted of murdering Heather Heyer. One of my chaplains is going to be the chaplain to the lady who just got 40 years for her participation before the crime of killing that little girl from Blacksburg 2 years ago. Nobody wants to do that, do they? Well, here's the thing. I got 32 men and women called by God to go inside the prison, and they have one request of me. Chaplain, I'm working part-time. It's so hard. And my name is Lynn, and I served as a chaplain. Get it? Chaplain. So many of them still call me chaplain. But they said, let me work more. Please get me to full-time. Please get me to full-time. I need to be there. The men need me, and they do. The women need me, and they do. Out of our 32 chaplains, only 12 of them are serving their institutions full-time. Because when we had this uptick in incarceration in the 1980s, which way was denominational giving going since then? Down. So when we built 18 new prisons in Virginia since the 1980s, we had to staff 18 new facilities. And we have more people, so we need more chaplains. But the denominations, here's the sad truth. Nice people will care about hungry children. Nice people will care about cute little kittens. Who are the people that are going to care about those in prison? Christians? Sadly, only some Christians. I need your help. And that's the third piece. Be aware of them, identify with them, help them. How do you help people in prison? Never have to come face to face with somebody in order to pray for them. Please. We believe in the value of prayer. I even have an email prayer list. I send out an email like once a month just to say, hey, if you feel inclined to pray, let me know. Got a nice little sign-up sheet over here. If you'll tag it on the side, email prayer list, I'll put you on my little list. If that's your gift, we can use it. If you feel like you want to go in, I can connect you to a chaplain. I can connect you to a facility. Whether you go in once a week, once a month, whether you want to help with reentry, there are people, we do not do reentry. Our mission is the chaplains inside, but our chaplains connect with reentry people throughout the community, and we try to build bridges and networks, and at least if somebody calls me and they say, actually I had this happen yesterday. Somebody sent me an email, said there's an ex-felon, he's 22, pulled a felony charge for pickpocketing. He's married, his little sweetheart is 1 year younger. They have 2 children together, 3.5 and 1.5. and they're living in an RV with no place for it to park, and they need a place.